Hi, I'm Shelley Weber-Tompkins, and I specialize in fertility for couples. And today I wanted to talk about a condition called Luteinized Unruptured Follicle Syndrome, otherwise known as LUFS for short. And it's something that doesn't get talked about very often, but it's definitely a circumstance that can get in the way of your ovulation and your fertility. So I wanted to make sure you knew what to look for in this case because sometimes it's a hard one to actually figure out that you have. Normally with LEFs, you're looking at a trapped egg inside your ovary. So it's not getting released properly. And the process of ovulation is fascinating because what has to happen each month, a little hole has to appear in your ovary, one side or the other, and the egg will break free from that hole, and then the fimbria of your fallopian tubes will grab onto it, bring it in, and then allow a sperm to be able to fertilize it. So if the egg does not break free of the ovary, if that little incision or opening doesn't appear, then it gets trapped in there. And so you may have all the signs and symptoms of ovulation, but then it may not be actually releasing like it needs to. So that kind of problem shows up. Sometimes there's different things that can cause it. The only way you know if you actually have a problem with this is if your doctor does a test, like an ultrasound around the time when you are pre-ovulation, when you think you're about to ovulate, and then do it again after you believe you ovulated. And so beforehand, it should look like there's a good egg about to be released. And then afterwards, show signs of a corpus luteum being present. And so it's a very different look to it. And so if they see the corpus luteum, then they know the egg broke free, got out, and so you would have had a good ovulation cycle. But if they don't see the corpus luteum and they still see the egg there, then they'll know you didn't have ovulation. So this is an important thing because you want to make sure that you're ovulating properly. And if you don't know what the problem is, why you haven't conceived, then it's going to be really frustrating. So this is just one of those things that you might want to have your doctor look into if you've been trying for a while and you think you're ovulating, but you're not sure. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about today. It does make it harder to get pregnant because you can't get the sperm to the location. And what I wanted to mention is some of the things that might be getting in the way of it. So if your hormones are not getting to the location they need to, then that can be a problem because you have hormones that are going to the ovaries and the reproductive organs that are saying, this is what you need to do now. This is this is now time to have ovulation occur. This is time to start building your lining. So there's all these different factors and stimuli that comes down there to notify your reproductive organs what they need to do at any given time. So if you're not getting those signals about ovulation, then you're not going to get a good ovulation. The other thing is you need to make sure that you have good opening to the fallopian tubes. So having the HSG done, the hysterosalpingogram done, where they actually check and make sure that both tubes are open. That's really important. Sometimes people wait on that and it can be a pivotal factor. And if you did have, usually the things that get in the way of that are could be scar tissue, could be too much mucus and stuff that are in the lining that are blocking sperm getting to an egg. And so those are things that I definitely suggest people get, if they have not already, is an HSG, just to make sure tubes are open. The other thing is you need to have good blood flow. And that's something I talk about all the time. So if you have coolness in your lower abdomen or your rear is cold, sometimes you can't tell because if your hands are cold, then you're going to be pressing on those areas and not really know. But if you can tell and you have someone like, oh, it does feel a little bit cool there, then warming that area up is one way to help, but otherwise it's also making sure that you're doing good breathing exercises, getting enough energetics and blood flow into the reproductive organs. Also, you can do abdominal massage. And so, working on those areas, anywhere you feel like more tension, sometimes people have really a lot of tension in their abdomen. So, trying to open that up and loosen it, because just imagine if things are too tight, they can impact blood flow and passage into there. So, the more you can do to help that. Also, you can do more warming teas, have a not caffeinated, but a nice warming tea that's more opening. So, it could be herbal teas that are Chinese medicine herbal teas, which actually do a lot for helping open up blood supply and circulation, but sometimes even doing chai tea without the caffeine, because it's really warming and opening. And so anytime you're kind of like warming yourself up from the inside, you can be encouraging blood flow, and you want to get it down here. And some of the herbs in chai tea can direct. I actually advise people to make their own homemade version, because when you get the seeds and stuff yourself, they're going to have a little higher impact than something dried and older in a tea bag. So if you have the option, it's actually not hard to make. If you're following me, or you can DM me for a recipe for a really good homemade chai tea. That one's really nice, especially if you don't mind cinnamon and cardamom and ginger and those kinds of ingredients. If you don't like that, then just doing more warming teas, even a chamomile or cinnamon type teas, if you like that. But any kind of warming tea that's not caffeinated is going to be a good idea, especially before bedtime when you're trying to sleep. You don't want to do anything caffeinated. The other thing is looking for the signs of ovulation. So we're going back to, when you're looking at luteinized unruptured follicle, if you're not getting good cervical mucus during that time, maybe it's a little dry, you don't know what to look for, but you should be getting that good stretch of cervical mucus. And if you just have it where it's like it's barely doing this at all, and it's more kind of creamy dry, you're never getting to that good stretchy cervical mucus, then that also could be indicating that the ovulation factors may not be ideal. So the more you can work on helping get more energetics into this area. Acupuncture is another good way of working on it, because you're really trying to encourage ovulation. There's some red light therapy. There's, just doing, like I was talking about, the deep breathing exercises where you're really trying to help the rise and fall of your abdomen, like low. You want to make sure you have your hands there, it's nice and warm, and that you're really feeling the rise and fall of your hand on your abdomen. So that breath is getting in there. Doing more meditation, guided meditation is great too. There's lots of those on Google that are free, and you can start off with 10 minutes of just having someone that you like the voice of, and doing some of those exercises can be really beneficial. I talked already about how do you find out if you have LUFS, and that's going to your doctor and having them do an ultrasound pre and post ovulation. And they want to look and make sure that the egg has been released. And also blood tests can be another beneficial thing to have done for hormones, and just see where your hormones are at this point and be thorough, not just, you want your total estrogens. Your progesterone usually is better to test, I would say, mid-luteal phase. And so that's the time between your ovulation and your next period. That midpoint is when your progesterone should be at its highest. And so if you're not seeing that, that can also indicate that you don't have enough progesterone to help hold a pregnancy. If you're doing this naturally, that's really important. With IVF, they're usually going to give you progesterone to be either doing through a suppository or a shot. So if you're doing this naturally, you want to get your progesterone levels up, and having them check to see where they are is going to be really helpful. Otherwise, good tips to keep in mind is making sure you're doing more, I would say more cooked foods, especially in the winter months. You want to do more warming, do soups, cooked, steamed, sauteed vegetables. If you're doing fruits, try not to do a ton of them, but I always talk about the berries. At least the berries are also really good with antioxidants too. And then if you're having meats and stuff, it's fine, but I would say grass-fed. Sometimes the ones that you're getting are, they're very heavily hormone, but not in a good way. And so I usually suggest Butcher's Box or some place that delivers, if you're not close to something that would give you those kinds of good meats to choose from. Otherwise, if you have a store that's a health food store that you can, or where you can find good pasture raised types of fish and not fish, sorry, cows. Your meat products. And so, and even with chicken, you want to make sure also getting ones that are more fed with their they have natural ways of feeding and stuff. They're getting seed off the ground, and they've got areas to graze in. So that's really important too. I would say avoid caffeine because caffeine is more constricting. So that's really something you want to get away from. If you're only doing like a half a cup of coffee a day, and I mean literally like 4 ounces, then that's not so bad. If you can switch over to decaf, even better, especially a Swiss water pressed type of decaf. Avoid smoking, drinking. Those things are all going to get in the way. And when you're really trying to help this process of ovulation, you want to do everything you possibly can to get that going like it needs to. The last thing, and actually very important, is around ovulation. Sometimes if you have a headache or other things are happening at that time that are making you uncomfortable or you have pain, doing an NSAID is not a good idea for ovulation. So if you have a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory that you're taking, you need to avoid that, especially around ovulation, because you need actually a little bit of inflammation there to help that egg pop through the ovary. And so make sure you're not doing anything like that at that time. If you have pain, you can find some other things besides the NSAIDs to use. Okay, so those are really positive things you can do, is between the testing and changing the diet and making sure you're getting good flow of blood and hormones into the reproductive area. If you have any questions, please DM me. And in my book, which I have on the cover here of YouTube, it has all this stuff in detail and also steps to take. And so if you have a chance to look at that, you can get it off of Amazon, and they do have Kindle version, which is really inexpensive, but it takes you through all the steps. All right, you have a great day, and if you don't mind subscribing, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.